The Widow of Dovrefjell. Long ago, before the rail lines crossed the fjords and cities grew teeth of iron and smoke, the Dovrefjell mountains stood untouched and solemn, cloaked in pine forests and snow-glazed silence. In those days, tales were traded more than silver, and the people of the valleys whispered of creatures old as the stone, spirits that stirred under ice and moss, and shadows that remembered when gods walked freely through the pines. But none were whispered more than the story of the Widow of Dovrefjell. They say her name was Astrid, born beneath a waning moon in a hamlet called Vakhammer, where frost clung to the windows year-round and the birches never shed their bark. She was a midwife and healer, wise in the ways of herbs and lullabies. But wisdom, in the old times, was often mistaken for witchcraft, especially when it belonged to a woman who spoke little, loved the mountains more than men, and whose child was never seen though all knew she had borne one. Astrid lived alone in a sod-roofed cabin at the edge of the forest, where the pines grew thickest and the wind screamed in tongues no priest could translate. She brewed teas that eased fever and made salves that stitched flesh like a needle. No one denied she saved lives. But they feared her just the same, for her eyes were too gray and too knowing. And then there was her song. She sang only in winter, when the dark pressed hardest. A lullaby, soft and sorrowful, carried on the wind from her home. No one knew the words, but it curled through the village like smoke from a dying hearth. Some claimed it kept the wolves away. Others said it called something much older. The villagers kept their distance, save for when they needed her. That is until the night the child went missing. His name was Henrik, only 7, son of the blacksmith and his wife. He vanished from his bed during a storm, no footprints, no trace. The dogs wouldn't track, and the snow swallowed every path. Panic gripped the village. They searched the forest for 3 days. On the third, the boy's mother went to Astrid's hut with a knife. They found the hut empty. The fire cold. No footprints. No Astrid. Only a single strand of white blonde hair curled on the pillow and a crude wooden doll, its arms outstretched in the shape of a cross. Then came the dreams. The villagers began to speak of a woman in black drifting through the trees at night, her feet not touching the snow. Her hair like frost, her face pale as the moon. Always watching. Always singing that same lullaby, sad and slow, as though mourning something lost to time. Some said she was searching for her child. Others whispered that her child was never truly human, but something she had taken from the mountain, something that had awakened when Henrik vanished. Seasons passed. Children disappeared again, one every 7 years, always during a storm, always without trace. And always the lullaby followed, seeping from the woods like a scent, aching and cold. People began to leave Vakhammer. Farms were abandoned. Doors shuttered. And still the mountains watched. By the time Erik Dahl, a folklorist from Oslo, arrived in 1893, Vakhammer was more ghost than village. He had come following a string of letters from a man named Pastor Thun, the last remaining resident aside from 2 elderly couples. The letters spoke of dreams, of a woman with ice on her breath, and of the boy who vanished a generation ago. Erik, a skeptic by nature, believed the tales to be grief-born hysteria, residue of long winters and lonely minds. Yet, something in the details piqued him, the cadence of the lullaby described, the exactness of the vanishings, the convergence of dream accounts. So he went. The path to Vakhammer was cruel. The snow was early that year, and the winds had a hunger to them. But Erik made it by sleigh, arriving at dusk as the sky bled violet and the trees whispered among themselves. Pastor Thun, pale and thin, met him with eyes that looked like they hadn't shut in days. "She's waiting," Thun said, "because it's time again." "What do you mean?" "7 years," the pastor murmured. "It's always 7. And now it's begun to snow." Erik stayed in the church's old rectory. That night, the wind sang. Not a storm, but something else. A melody. Soft, repeating, mournful. He wrote it down phonetically, the best he could. Natbarn, Sovi Fred, kom aldri tilbake from Orchid. It chilled him more than he liked to admit. Over the next days, Eric explored the surrounding forests. He spoke to the two elder couples who had once known Astrid. Both remembered her kindness. Both also swore she had spoken to the mountain, literally, conversing with stone. She lost her son to it, one whispered. Or gave him to it. Eric found the ruins of her hut 3 miles into the woods. The roof had collapsed, moss thick over the hearth. But something about the air was wrong. Still. Listening. And carved into the stone by the door, a name, Elias. There had never been mention of a name before. He returned at dusk. That night, the storm began. It came hard, sudden, snow lashing sideways, wind like screaming. Eric lit a lamp and tried to focus on his notes, but the lullaby returned, louder now. As if it came from within the walls. He looked outside. In the field beyond the rectory, someone stood. A woman. Hair the color of moonlight. Dress like mourning shrouds. Eyes like dusk. She raised a hand. And then she was gone. Eric did not sleep. The next morning, Pastor Thune was missing. There were no footprints in the snow. Only the door swinging open, and a crude wooden doll left on his pillow. Eric ran. He left his notes behind, took only his journal and what warmth he could carry. But the wind chased him, and so did the song. He heard it behind him, in front of him, above him, inside him. He collapsed near the forest's edge, exhausted and half-frozen, and dreamt. In his dream, he stood inside the mountain. Not beneath it, inside it. A vast, echoing hall of stone, walls pulsing like the inside of a great beast. There, on a throne of root and bone, sat Astrid. She wept. In her arms was her son, not a boy, but a thing of frost and shadow, hollow-eyed, humming with hunger. I gave him to the mountain, she whispered. Because they took him from me. Now I take theirs. She looked up at Eric. You're next. He woke on the train to Oslo, raving with fever. They say he never fully recovered. His journal was found under his bed when he died 10 years later, filled with sketches of mountains with mouths, lullabies in forgotten tongues, and a single repeated sentence. The mountain remembers. Today, Bakehammer is gone. The land reclaimed by pine and wind. But sometimes, when the snow comes early and the wind sings just right, hikers swear they hear a lullaby in the distance. And those who follow it never return. So I ask you now, dear listener. Have you ever heard of a place where the mountain remembers its debts? Where songs are not sung, but stolen? If so, share your story in the comments below, because the wind is listening. If tales from mythos and murmurs stir your soul, then wander no more. Subscribe, like, and share. For more stories that murmur through the mists.